My family thought it'd be hilarious to dump me in another state and drive off like it was just some prank. Let's see if he figures out how to get back, they said, laughing as they left me behind. Well, I never went back. 15 years later, they finally tracked me down. I'd racked up 107 missed calls by then. That summer, I turned 22, wasn't supposed to be anything special. I was stuck working in my dad's hardware shop for terrible pay. Still living under his roof because college wasn't realistic according to both the Chase and my father. And of course, I remained the go-to punching bag for my golden boy brother, Victor. We weren't broke exactly, but we sure as hell weren't the type of family booking Disney vacations. So when Chase, that's my dad, by the way, announced we were going on a family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I should have seen the red flags. By day 3 of that miserable drive, I was already kicking myself for not faking the flu or something to avoid going. My dad and Victor had been tag teaming their favorite pastime. Make Salvador's life a living hell. My mom, Miriam, would now and then mutter, "That's enough," in her barely there voice, but we all knew it didn't mean squat. Let me explain a little about my family, just so you understand what I was dealing with. Chase wasn't your average jerk of a dad. He was the type who'd drag you out of bed at 3 a.m. to scream about a forgotten chore, who'd throw out anything of yours that annoyed him, and who'd been drilling into my head that I was useless since before I could even tie my shoes. Victor caught on early. Either become dad's carbon copy or end up like me. You can guess which route he took. That morning, we pulled over at this lonely rest stop in the middle of Colorado, surrounded by nothing but endless fields, a couple of mountains in the distance, and this pitiful little building with vending machines and bathrooms. I'd been asleep in the back seat of our old green Suburban and got out to stretch and hit the bathroom. Dad and Victor were cracking up about something, and Mom was busy fussing with her makeup in the mirror. I can still picture exactly what I had on. This worn-out Metallica tee, jeans with a hole in the knee, and a pair of busted Vans that had seen better days. I didn't take my phone because it was charging in the car. Didn't grab my wallet either. Why would I? I was just stepping into a bathroom for a few minutes in the middle of nowhere, 10 minutes tops, probably less. When I stepped back outside, blinking into the bright Colorado sun, the parking spot was empty. The Suburban was gone. At first, I figured they'd just park somewhere else to mess with me, so I wandered around the whole rest stop. Nothing. And here's the thing about being betrayed by your own family. It cuts deeper than anything else ever could. I sat on the curb for an hour, convincing myself they were just messing around and would pull back in any second, laughing like always. Cars came, and when a couple people gave me strange looks, one trucker asked if I was all right. I told him I was waiting on my girlfriend. She was just inside the bathroom. He nodded and drove off. After a while, maybe an hour or two, that creeping cold feeling settled in my gut. They weren't coming back. My first thought was to borrow someone's phone and call them, maybe plead with them to turn around. But as I was walking toward this woman with 2 kids, something just stopped me, like a film reel of my whole childhood played in my mind. Every time they humiliated me, every cruel joke they told at my expense, I could almost hear their voices. Victor's smug laughter, "Dude, bet he's bawling like a baby right now." My dad's voice, gravelly and dismissive. "If he's not as dumb as he looks, he'll figure it out." And Mom's useless little sigh that never did anything to stop them. That was when I made up my mind. I walked up to the woman and asked if I could use her phone, but I didn't call my family. I called information and got the number to the closest shelter in Grand Junction, about 40 miles away. Then I told her my family had a last-minute emergency and had to go ahead, but someone would be picking me up later. She hesitated, obviously unsure, but I guess I looked desperate enough, or harmless enough, because she said yes. That first night in the shelter hit me like a slap of reality. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. No wallet, no ID, no cash, no one to call. Dave, the guy running the shelter, let me hop on their old computer. I used it to find my uncle's address from the wedding invite I'd seen back home. For a second, I thought about heading to the wedding, maybe confronting them. But then I just stared at the screen and asked myself, why? Why chase after people who'd tossed me out of their lives like trash for a laugh? Instead, I opened a brand new email account. I researched how to replace lost IDs. I Googled under-the-table jobs that paid cash. I started to build a plan. 2 days later, I was elbows deep in dirty dishes at this little diner called Sonny's. The owner, Geraldine, was this wild 60-something woman with streaks of purple in her gray hair and more tattoos than I could count. I just walked in, told her my wallet had been stolen, but I was willing to work. She gave me a long look and said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me. I bury you behind the freezer. You start now." That's the thing about hitting rock bottom. There's nowhere left to go but up. I worked double shifts for a week straight, slept at the shelter, and wore whatever they had in the donation bin. Dave helped me start the paperwork for a new ID by contacting Vital Records back home. I bought a cheap pay-as-you-go phone from Walmart with the first 40 bucks I made, exactly 1 week after they ditched me. That phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was my mom, voice all shaky like she'd been crying. "Where are you? Are you all right? We've been looking everywhere." "Yeah, right, it was just a joke," she claimed. "Sure it was." She said they waited just down the road for 20 minutes and came back, but couldn't find me. Absolute garbage. I sat there listening to her fake panic. In the background, I could hear my dad barking at her to tell me to quit being dramatic and get my ass to Uncle Rick's and Victor. He was laughing. "Salvador, are you there? Say something." "We've been worried sick," she said, but that cold pit in my gut was gone by then. What I felt now was crystal clear. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own," I said, my voice steadier than it had ever been around them. "So watch me." Then I hung up, blocked the number, blocked every single contact I could remember. Just to be sure, I went to Verizon the next day and had them change my number completely. I racked up 27 missed calls before finally changing my number. I couldn't help picturing them getting more and more pissed as the realization sank in. Their favorite punching bag wasn't crawling back to get punched. 1 month later, I was living in a tiny studio apartment perched above a laundromat. It was cramped and constantly smelled like fabric softener, but it was mine. I'd worked my way up to prep cook at Sonny's, and Geraldine had started showing me how to chop vegetables like a pro without slicing off a fingertip. Every once in a while, I'd log into my old email, the one they all still had, and check the damage. The inbox was flooded, mostly from my mom. "Please come home, we're sorry." Then from my dad, "This little tantrum needs to stop, time to grow up." And Victor, "Dude, it was a joke. Quit being such a little bitch." I never replied, not once. That's the thing about finally getting a taste of freedom. Once you have it, there's no chance in hell you're going back into the cage. I won't sit here and pretend like it was all sunshine and fresh starts. Some nights I'd scroll through Instagram and see pictures of people surrounded by families who actually gave a damn. Holidays with hugs, birthday dinners, group selfies with captions like "blessed" or "family first." And yeah, it hurt. That kind of ache doesn't go away just because you've cut the cord. I had nights where the loneliness hit so hard, it felt like being swallowed whole by a black hole. Holidays were the worst by far. But even on the hardest mornings, I still woke up in my crappy little apartment smelling like laundry softener. Clocked into a dishwashing job where no one ever called me useless, and kept stacking bricks to build something I could finally call mine. 3 months after they left me on the side of that Colorado highway, I checked the email one final time. There was a message from my mom. "Your grandmother keeps asking about you. Please, just let us know you're okay." I didn't respond. I shut the browser, deleted the entire account, then took my old SIM card and chucked it into the dumpster behind Sonny's like it was radioactive. That same night, Geraldine handed me a rolling pin and started walking me through her signature apple pie, said I had good hand for pastry. It was the first compliment I could remember receiving in maybe ever. I never looked back. Update 1. 5 years after that rest stop ambush, I came face to face with a familiar name while scrolling through Facebook, not because I've been actively stalking my family. Well, okay, maybe a little, but because Victor had just popped up in a local news article back home. He'd been busted for a DUI, wrapped his car around a telephone pole. The only thing he managed to hurt was the pole. The newspaper used this old high school football photo of him, all clean cut, grinning like he owned the world. Right underneath, it was the mugshot, puffy face, dead eyes, reality catching up. Karma doesn't rush, but it never loses its way. It'll find your address eventually. By that time, I'd carved out a life for myself in Colorado. My little studio above a laundromat had been replaced with a proper one-bedroom that actually had windows. I'd climbed the ladder from dishwasher to line cook to assistant manager at Sonny's. Geraldine still ran the place like a war general with a rolling pin. But somewhere along the line, I stopped being the stray kid she took pity on and started feeling more like, I don't know, a weird sort of nephew. When I finally had real savings, my first big splurge wasn't flashy, just a decent laptop, enough to take online classes through the community college, business management, intro to accounting, the kind of classes people like my dad used to say were for quitters who couldn't handle real work. My days were like clockwork. Mornings at Sonny's, afternoons with my nose in textbooks, back to work in the evenings, over and over, just steady, unremarkable progress. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still carrying damage. Trust? Yeah, I had trust issues the way some people have Spotify playlists, organized by genre, constantly updated, and always ready to hit skip. I made exactly 2 friends in those 5 years. Doug, my upstairs neighbor, played bass in a band so bad it looped around it kind of good, he'd sometimes drop off bottles of homebrewed beer that tasted like carbonated regret. And then there was Geraldine, if you could count your boss as a friend. Everything started to shift when Avery started showing up at Sonny's. Every Tuesday and Thursday, without fail, always ordered the same thing: Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, and sat at the counter with her nose in a textbook. Later, I found out it was med school stuff. She had this way of zoning out so completely that she'd freeze mid-bite, fork halfway to her mouth. For minutes at a time, I once timed her 7 minutes and 23 seconds before she realized she was still holding a forkful of cold eggs. It took 4 months of refilling her coffee before she actually looked up at me. I mean, really looked. Her eyes widened slightly, and she said, "You know your name tag is spelled wrong, right?" It wasn't, but that became our little thing. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I wore a new wrong name: Steve, Raul, Eli. She'd smirk and correct me. I'd act shocked, the stupidest flirtation in human history. But somehow, it worked. Our first date wasn't even meant to be a date. Her study group bailed last minute, but she still had a reservation at this pizza place that was impossible to get into. I just happened to be wiping down the counter when she got the cancellation text. One shrug later, I was sitting across from her at Antonio's, both of us slowly realizing that, yeah, this was definitely a date. 6 months after that night, she moved into my place. A year later, we upgraded to something slightly bigger. A 2-bedroom apartment where the toilet didn't make ocean noises and the neighbors didn't practice bass solos at 2 a.m. And yeah, I still checked in on my family through burner accounts. Not proud of it, but I never said I was perfect. Dad's hardware store started tanking after the Home Depot opened out by the highway. I'd see his angry rants on local Facebook groups. Each post more bitter, more unhinged than the last. Mom's socials turned into this strange little shrine to family. Endless throwback pics of us grinning like we'd all just won the lottery, posts about missing her boys. Plural, which was rich. She'd tag Victor in every one, but never mention me, like I'd been deleted. Victor was flailing, job to job, always posting cryptic junk about haters and big things coming. The classic online fog machine for a life going down the drain. 3 years in, during inventory, Geraldine pulled me aside, said she was thinking about opening a second Sonny's on the other side of town, asked if I'd want to run it. Not on run, big difference. I didn't sleep that night, kept thinking it had to be some kind of test or a joke. People like me didn't get shots like that. Chase had made sure I knew my place. That's the thing about poisonous beliefs. They linger in your bloodstream long after you've outrun the snake. But I said yes because Avery, half asleep beside me, mumbled I'd be stupid not to, because Doug, stoned out of his mind when I told him, said, "Duh, you already run the place anyway." Because Geraldine wasn't Chase, wasn't my family. She'd never once made me feel like I didn't matter. Sonny's East opened 6 months later, smaller than the original, new location, new menu, my menu. That first year, I worked 90-hour weeks, dropped 10 pounds I couldn't afford. Avery and I fought constantly about how I was never home. Came back more than once to passive-aggressive post, "It's on the fridge." But it worked. People showed up, then they came back. The food was solid. The vibe was good. We weren't rolling in cash, but we were holding our own. 4 years after they left me behind, I made enough to help Avery with her med school loans. Not all of them. Those things are predatory monsters, but enough to put a dent. She cried when I showed her the payment confirmation. Not cute movie crying either, full on, red-faced, snot dripping, hiccuping sobs. I'd never felt more real in my life. Then my grandmother died. I found out through Facebook. Mom posted some long-winded tribute with 50 heart emojis. Grandma Rose had been the only one who ever stood up to Chase, the only one who looked at me and actually saw me. She used to slip me 20s when no one was looking, told me to save it for my escape. I think she meant college. Turned out it was more literal than that. I thought about going to the funeral, even checked flights. Avery said she'd go with me, said she'd hold my hand through the whole ugly thing. Doug offered me his beat-up hatchback if I wanted to drive instead. Geraldine just shrugged and said, "Dead folks don't know if you show up. Do what brings you peace." I didn't go. I sent flowers instead. Plain sympathy bouquet, card signed Salvador, no note, no return address. And Facebook blew up. Mom posting about signs from beyond. Victor making dramatic, cryptic remarks about prodigal sons. Chase stayed silent, at least online. but I could picture the chaos behind closed doors. A week later, I got a friend request from some account I didn't recognize. No posts, no friends, just a name I didn't know. I almost deleted it until I read the message. Sal, it's Uncle Rick. Your mom gave me your old email, but it bounced. Are you okay? We've been worried. Your dad's been asking around. I blocked the account immediately. That night, I had my first panic attack in 2 years. Curled up on our bathroom floor at 3 a.m., trying not to wake Avery, feeling like my lungs were caving in. All I could see was Chase, tracking me down, storming into Sonny's, burning it all down. Avery found me an hour later. Didn't say a word, just sat beside me, her shoulder touching mine. When I finally caught my breath, she said, "They can't take anything from you that you don't give them." The next morning, I called a lawyer, got advice about restraining orders, just in case, locked down all my social accounts, told Geraldine to make sure no one at Sonny's gave out anything about me to anyone. Control what you can control. That became the mantra. 5 years to the day after they left me on that roadside, I married Avery, just a small ceremony in a state park. Doug was my best man. Geraldine made the cake and sobbed through the whole thing, mascara running down her cheeks. Avery's giant, noisy family folded me in like I'd always been there. Her dad told dad jokes that didn't make me flinch. Her mom gave hugs that didn't send my nervous system into lockdown. That's the thing about found family. Sometimes it finds you right when you've stopped looking. A week after the wedding, I was scrolling through my dummy Facebook account late at night when I saw it. A post from Chase on a community page asking for info about his son, Salvador, last known location, Grand Junction, Colorado. Family emergency. There was no emergency. I knew that much. What I didn't know was why. After 5 years of silence, they were suddenly looking for me. So I dug in, made another fake profile, joined the hometown groups, pieced together the clues. Dad's store had closed. Their house was going into foreclosure. Mom was being vague about health problems. Victor had moved back in after his third DUI. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they needed something. And for the first time in 5 years, I smiled thinking about them. Not because I was glad they were suffering, but because I finally understood something important. I didn't care anymore. I closed the laptop, climbed into bed next to my sleeping wife, and made a quiet decision. I keep watching them from a distance, not out of hate and not out of love either, just because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's what you build while they're busy tearing themselves apart. The next chapter started with a LinkedIn notification. 15 years after they left me at that rest stop in Colorado, my carefully rebuilt life hit a glitch. Someone had viewed my profile 27 times in one day. Not that strange for LinkedIn. Recruiters do that kind of thing all the time. But this wasn't some stranger. It was Victor Matthews, my brother. That's the thing about the past. It waits, hangs back in the tall grass for years, biding its time, then strikes when you're least expecting it. By then, my life looked nothing like it did during those first shaky months in Grand Junction. Avery had finished med school, completed a residency, and now worked part-time at a local clinic, so she could spend more time with the kids. 2 of them, Zoe was 7, Eli 4. We'd moved out of the apartment over the laundromat years ago, bought a modest 4-bedroom at the edge of town, nothing flashy, but it had a backyard for the kids and a garden where I tried, unsuccessfully, to grow tomatoes. Sonny's had grown too. 3 locations now, still small, still local, but enough that I didn't have to be on the line every day unless someone called out sick. Geraldine had semi-retired 2 years ago, though she still dropped by unannounced to inspect the pies and grumble about the crust. I thought I'd made peace with the past. I still checked in on them now and then, but it had faded to maybe a glance every couple of months. Last I'd heard, Chase and Miriam had downsized after losing their house. Victor had gotten married, divorced, and remarried. Life moved on. For all of us. But that LinkedIn ping shook me. 15 years of silence. And now this? I mentioned it to Avery during our usual Sunday night routine. Folding laundry while half watching whatever show we were behind on, she paused, holding 2 mismatched socks, and asked if I was okay. I nodded. What else could I say? That I suddenly felt like a scared 22-year-old again, abandoned on the side of a highway? That I could hear Chase's voice in my head, telling me I was worthless? 3 days later, I was at Sonny's East helping sort out a coffee filter mix-up when Maya called back from the front. There's some family here asking for you. My heart stuttered. My first thought was Avery's parents, who sometimes surprised us when they were driving through. I walked out, already rehearsing how I'd get them stay for dinner. But it wasn't Avery's family. It was mine. Chase looked older, grayer. His once imposing presence had shriveled into something smaller. Miriam's face was drawn. Her hair dyed that too dark shade that always tries too hard. Victor stood like a copy of our father at 40. Same posture, same entitled way of filling space. And beside him, a woman I didn't recognize, young, maybe early 20s, hanging back like she wasn't sure why she was even there. No one spoke. The noise of the lunch crowd seemed to fade until all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Chase spoke first, said my name like it was a question. I nodded. My voice had checked out. I'd imagined this moment for 15 years, 100 different ways. Sometimes I confront them with all the righteous fury I'd carried. Other times I was aloof, unbothered, above it all. And yeah, in a few late-night mental reruns, there were even hugs and forgiveness. But reality is always messy, eh? I pointed to an empty table in the corner, asked Maya to bring waters, and sat down across from the people who'd once called themselves my family. They'd found me through a magazine article, Rocky Mountain Rising, 10 local business success stories. My feature was small, just a sidebar photo of me standing outside Sonny's. But it was enough. A friend of Mom's from high school had moved to Colorado, saw the article, and sent it to her with a, "Hey, isn't this your son?" Message. 107 missed calls. That's how many times they'd tried my old number over the years. According to Mom, she said like I was supposed to be impressed. Then came the barrage. Mom, crying about how they'd worried. Chase, trying to rewrite history and tell me I'd misunderstood what happened that day. Victor, acting like we were just two brothers catching up over lunch. And the woman, Victor's second wife, Harper, said nothing, just sat there, watching me with cautious curiosity. I didn't say much, let them talk, watch them rewrite their version of the story. One where they were confused, not cruel, where I'd left, not been abandoned. I caught the way Chase kept scanning the restaurant, eyes calculating, noticing the lunch traffic, the flow, the value. I saw the tremor in Mom's hand when she lifted her glass. Victor's practiced smile flickered every time I glanced his way. When they finally ran out of gas, I asked the only thing that mattered. Why now? That's when the Rayall story came out. In fragments and awkward silences, they admitted the truth. Chase had medical issues, heart problems, no insurance. Their second house was in foreclosure. Victor's latest scheme, something vague and doomed involving crypto, had gone belly up. Mom needed knee surgery she couldn't afford. They weren't there for reconciliation. They were there for money. I should have been furious, should have kicked them out on the spot. But instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. They looked so small, so lost, so desperate. These giants who once held my entire world in their hands were, in the end, just flawed, broken people. That night, I invited them over for dinner at my house, told them I needed time to think, to talk to Avery. They agreed quickly, with Chase already acting like it was a done deal. That afternoon felt surreal. I picked up Zoe from her dance class, helped Eli with his preschool show and tell prep, all while texting Avery updates about who was coming over for dinner. She offered to take the kids to her sister's house, but I said no. I wanted them there. I wanted my family to meet my family. Dinner was chicken enchiladas, my specialty, well, my version of it, a recipe from the back of an old El Paso box that I'd tweaked over the years. Zoe set the table without being asked, carefully placing the forks on the wrong side, until Avery gently corrected her. Eli insisted on wearing his Spider-Man costume because it was Tuesday. Apparently, Tuesday was Spider-Man Day. When the doorbell rang, I almost dropped the dish I was carrying. Avery squeezed my arm as she passed by, whispering that she had my back no matter what. The kids looked up at the door, curiously, sensing something important was happening. That's the thing about moments you've dreaded. When they finally arrive, they're somehow both worse and better than you imagined. The introductions were awkward. Chase kept calling Avery Karen. Despite her corrections, Miriam couldn't stop crying every time she looked at the kids, which freaked Eli out. Victor and Harper were the least awful, at least trying to make small talk, though Victor kept dropping hints about how family helps family. After dinner, Avery took the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that clearly said, "Text if you need extraction." Then it was just me and them, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt far too small. Chase jumped straight into his pitch about how family sticks together, how he'd always known I'd make something of myself, lie, and how they just needed a little help getting back on their feet. $20,000, just a loan. Of course, I let him finish. Then I asked him if he remembered what he said to me on my 18th birthday. He looked blank, I reminded him, at least you can't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem. I asked Mom if she remembered what she'd done when Chase threw my community college acceptance letter in the trash. Nothing. She'd done nothing. I asked Victor if he remembered telling my first girlfriend that I was probably a faggot anyway when she came looking for me. They squirmed, made excuses. Chase started to get that dangerous edge to his voice, the one that used to make me shrink. But here's the thing. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was 15 years and a million miles away from that person. I went to my office, came back with an envelope, and handed it to Chase. Inside was a check $4.73.50. Chase looked at it, confused. He asked what the hell this was supposed to be. I told him. In 2010, that was exactly what a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown would have cost, the exact amount it would have taken for me to make it back home for where they abandoned me. The silence was absolute. Then Chase started shouting, called me ungrateful, selfish, said I'd always been a disappointment. The greatest hits album of my childhood, playing one last time. I didn't argue, didn't shout back. I just stood up and told them it was time to leave. Mom tried a different approach. Tears, guilt. How could I do this to family? Victor went cold. The mask of friendly brother completely dropped. Harper just looked embarrassed for all of them. When they finally left, Chase crumpled the check and threw it on our front step. I closed the door and leaned against it. My legs were suddenly shaky. Avery came downstairs, asked if I was okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, checked on the sleeping kids, got ready for bed like it was any other night. As I was setting the security system, I pulled up the front door camera on my phone. They were still in the driveway, arguing, Chase gesturing wildly, Mom crying. Victor staring at our house with that expression I knew too well. Envy mixed with hatred. Finally, they got in their rental car and drove away. I've never heard from them again. Don't expect to. The chapter is closed. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't something you do. It's something you live. Every happy moment with my kids, every inside joke with Avery, every quiet Sunday morning with nothing to fear, every single ordinary day in a life built on my terms. I never made it back home. I did something better. I built one.